February 15, 1994. Seattle, Washington. Photographer Marcus "Tank" Rodriguez received the assignment that would define his career and haunt his conscience forever. His editor at Celebrity Spotlight magazine had given him a simple directive: follow Kurt Cobain for 48 hours straight and document everything. What Tank captured during those 2 days would reveal the devastating human cost of fame and ultimately change how the paparazzi industry operated. Tank Rodriguez was known in the celebrity photography world as one of the most relentless stalkers in the business. He had made his reputation by getting impossible shots of stars in their most vulnerable moments. But nothing had prepared him for what he would witness during his extended surveillance of Kurt Cobain. "I thought I was just going to get some candid shots of a rock star living his daily life," Tank later revealed in a confession that shocked the entertainment industry. "I had no idea I was about to document a man's psychological breakdown in real time." The assignment began at 6 a.m. on February 15th, when Tank positioned himself outside Kurt's Lake Washington Boulevard home. His editor Janet Morrison had equipped him with high-powered telephoto lenses, night vision equipment, and instructions to capture every moment of Kurt's life for the next 48 hours. "The magazine was paying me $50,000 for this assignment," Tank recalled. "That was more money than I'd ever been offered for a single story. They wanted something exclusive, something that would show Kurt Cobain like he'd never been seen before." What Tank didn't know was that he was beginning his surveillance during one of the darkest periods of Kurt's life. Kurt had been struggling with severe depression, increasing drug use, and growing paranoia about being constantly watched by media and fans. The first disturbing moment came just 2 hours into the surveillance. Tank watched through his telephoto lens as Kurt stood at his kitchen window, staring directly at the photographer's hidden position across the lake. "Kurt was looking right at me," Tank remembered. "Even though I was hundreds of yards away and completely concealed, he somehow knew I was there. He stood at that window for 20 minutes, just staring. It was like he could sense being watched." But Kurt's awareness of being surveilled only made his behavior more erratic. Instead of going about normal daily activities, Kurt began acting like someone who knew he was being hunted. At 10 a.m., Kurt left his house wearing dark sunglasses and a hooded jacket, driving his car in a pattern that Tank recognized as counter-surveillance techniques. "Kurt was driving like someone trained in evasion," Tank explained. "He was taking random turns, stopping suddenly, doubling back on himself. This wasn't someone just trying to lose paparazzi. This was someone who was genuinely afraid." Tank followed Kurt to a series of increasingly bizarre locations. First, Kurt drove to a children's playground where he sat alone on a swing set for an hour, not interacting with anyone, just staring into space. "The photos I took at that playground were heartbreaking," Tank admitted. "Kurt looked like a lost child himself. He was so thin, so pale, so obviously struggling. But I kept shooting because that was my job." From the playground, Kurt drove to Pike Place Market, where Tank captured what would become some of the most controversial celebrity photographs ever taken. Kurt wandered through the market like a ghost, buying random items he would immediately throw away, talking to himself and displaying clear signs of psychological distress. "Kurt bought a bouquet of flowers and then immediately dropped them in a trash can," Tank observed. "He purchased food and threw it away without eating it. He was going through the motions of normal behavior, but nothing he did made sense." The most disturbing footage came when Kurt entered a small record shop. Tank, following at a distance, watched as Kurt began crying while listening to music on headphones. The breakdown was so intense that other customers began to stare and whisper. "Kurt was sobbing in public and I was photographing it," Tank said. "People in the store were pointing at him, recognizing him, and I realized that my presence was making everything worse. Every flash of my camera was drawing more attention to his pain." As the first day continued, Kurt's paranoia intensified. He began checking over his shoulder constantly, taking photos of strangers with a disposable camera, and making frantic phone calls from payphones instead of using his cell phone. Kurt knew he was being followed, but he couldn't figure out by whom or from where, Tank recalled. "The paranoia was destroying him, and I was the cause of it." The evening of the first day brought Tank's most ethically challenging moment. He followed Kurt to a known drug area of Seattle, where Kurt met with several individuals in what were clearly drug transactions. "I had photos of Kurt buying heroin," Tank revealed. "Clear, undeniable evidence of illegal drug activity. My editor would have paid me a fortune for those shots. But watching Kurt inject drugs in an alley while constantly looking around in fear, I realized I wasn't documenting a celebrity anymore. I was watching someone destroy themselves." Tank made the decision to continue following Kurt through the night, using his night vision equipment to monitor Kurt's house after he returned home at 2 a.m. "What I saw through those night vision cameras still haunts me," Tank admitted. Kurt didn't sleep. He spent the entire night pacing around his house, checking locks, looking out windows, talking to himself. He was having what I now understand was a complete psychological break. The second day began at 6 a.m. when Kurt left his house again, this time heading to the cemetery where his friend had been buried. Tank followed, documenting Kurt's solitary visit to the gravesite. Kurt spent 3 hours at that cemetery. Tank remembered. He was having conversations with the gravestone, crying, laughing, acting like someone who was completely disconnected from reality. And I was photographing all of it from behind trees and tombstones. During the cemetery visit, Tank captured what he later described as the most disturbing image of the entire assignment. Kurt had collapsed beside the grave, curled up in a fetal position, and appeared to be having some kind of breakdown or seizure. "I should have stopped taking pictures and called for help," Tank said. "But my training as a paparazzi photographer had conditioned me to keep shooting no matter what. I got the shot instead of helping a human being who was clearly in crisis." After leaving the cemetery, Kurt drove to several locations that seemed random, but that Tank later realized were places from Kurt's past. His old apartment, the first club where Nirvana had performed, the street where he had lived when he was homeless. Kurt was conducting some kind of farewell tour of his life, Tank observed. He was visiting every significant place from his past, and he was documenting these visits with his own camera. It was like he was saying goodbye. The final disturbing sequence occurred on the evening of the second day. Tank followed Kurt to a gun store where Kurt spent 45 minutes looking at firearms before leaving without making a purchase. "That gun store visit changed everything for me," Tank revealed. "I realized that I wasn't just documenting Kurt Cobain's daily life. I was potentially documenting his final days alive, and my surveillance was contributing to his psychological deterioration." After the gun store visit, Kurt drove to a secluded area by the water where he sat alone for hours, staring at the lake. Tank watched through his telephoto lens as Kurt made what appeared to be several emotional phone calls. Kurt was crying during those phone calls. Tank remembered. He would hang up, throw his phone, then pick it up and call someone else. It was clear he was reaching out for help, but I don't know if anyone understood how desperate he was. The 48-hour assignment officially ended at 6 a.m. on February 17th, but Tank made a decision that would change his career forever. Instead of delivering the photographs to Celebrity Spotlight magazine, he destroyed all of the footage. "I had documented a man's complete psychological breakdown," Tank explained. "I had photographs that showed Kurt Cobain at his absolute lowest point, evidence of drug use, mental illness, and what I now believe were signs of suicidal ideation. Publishing those photos wouldn't have been journalism. It would have been exploitation." Tank's decision to destroy the photographs cost him his $50,000 fee and his reputation in the paparazzi industry. Celebrity Spotlight magazine sued him for breach of contract, and other publications blacklisted him from future assignments. "I lost my career, but I kept my conscience," Tank reflected. "Those 48 hours taught me that there has to be a line between documenting celebrity culture and participating in someone's destruction." The story of Tank's surveillance assignment remained secret for years, known only to a few people in the entertainment industry. But after Kurt's death 7 weeks later, Tank began speaking publicly about what he had witnessed. Kurt died on April 5, 1994. Tank said, "When I heard the news, I knew that what I had documented in those 48 hours was a preview of his final breakdown. The paranoia, the drug use, the visits to his past, he was already saying goodbye to his life." Tank's confession about the surveillance assignment led to industry-wide discussions about the ethics of paparazzi photography and the responsibility that media organizations have toward the mental health of their subjects. Dr. Patricia Williams, a celebrity psychologist, analyzed Tank's account and concluded that the intensive surveillance had likely accelerated Kurt's psychological decline. What Tank documented was the psychological torture that constant surveillance creates, Dr. Williams explained. Kurt knew he was being watched, but not by whom or why. That kind of paranoid uncertainty can drive someone who's already struggling into complete psychological collapse. Tank's story also revealed the extent to which celebrity magazines were willing to invade privacy for exclusive content. The assignment he had been given, 48 hours of continuous surveillance, represented a new level of intrusive coverage that hadn't been attempted before. "They wanted to own every moment of Kurt's life for 2 days," Tank said. They didn't care about his privacy, his mental health, or his humanity. He was just content to them, and I was the camera they used to steal his dignity. In the years following Kurt's death, Tank became an advocate for ethical photography and helped establish industry guidelines for celebrity coverage that prohibited the kind of extended surveillance he had conducted. Kurt Cobain's death changed how I understood my responsibility as a photographer, Tank concluded. We have the power to document people's lives, but we also have the power to destroy them. Those 48 hours taught me that some pictures aren't worth taking. The disturbing footage that Tank captured but never published remains a dark secret of the entertainment industry, a reminder of how close celebrity culture came to documenting and potentially contributing to the final breakdown of one of music's most important artists. In the immediate aftermath of Kurt's death, Tank struggled with overwhelming guilt about his role in the musician's final weeks. He began seeing Dr. Amanda Foster, a therapist who specialized in treating professionals who had witnessed traumatic events. Tank came to me with classic symptoms of PTSD. Dr. Foster recalled. He was having nightmares about Kurt, flashbacks to specific moments during the surveillance. During therapy sessions, Tank revealed additional disturbing details about the 48-hour assignment that he had initially kept to himself. Kurt wasn't just paranoid about being followed, Tank disclosed. He was actively trying to communicate with whoever was watching him. On the second day, he held up handwritten signs to windows. The signs said things like, "Help me and I can't stop this." And Dr. Foster was horrified by these details. Kurt was essentially trying to use the paparazzi surveillance as a cry for help. He was attempting to communicate his desperation through that surveillance. Dr. Michael Chang, a psychiatrist who had worked with celebrities, explained that Kurt's behavior was consistent with fame-induced psychosis. When someone lives under constant scrutiny for extended periods, their relationship with reality can become severely distorted, Dr. Chang explained. Kurt's case created a perfect storm of paranoid delusion and actual persecution. Tank also discovered that Kurt had attempted to contact several people during those 48 hours who could have provided help, but his calls had gone unanswered or been misunderstood. Kurt called his therapist 6 times during my surveillance, Tank revealed. He called his manager, his bandmates, even his estranged father. But because he was so incoherent and paranoid, nobody understood that he was experiencing a complete psychological breakdown. The most heartbreaking revelation came when Tank learned that Kurt had been trying to check himself into mental health facilities during the surveillance period. On the afternoon of the second day, Kurt drove to 3 different psychiatric hospitals, Tank discovered. But because he was so recognizable, and his behavior was so erratic, staff at each facility turned him away. Tank's investigation also revealed that several other media organizations had been conducting similar surveillance operations simultaneously. I thought I was the only one following Kurt, Tank admitted. But I later learned that at least 4 other photographers were tracking his movements during those same 48 hours. Kurt was being hunted by an entire network of people. Working with Dr. Foster and other mental health professionals, Tank helped develop what became known as the Cobain Protocol, industry guidelines that required paparazzi photographers to report obvious signs of mental health crises to appropriate authorities. Tank also began working with celebrity mental health organizations to educate photographers about recognizing signs of psychological crisis. Most paparazzi have no training in mental health, Tank explained during workshops. They don't know the difference between someone having a bad day and someone experiencing a complete psychological breakdown. The workshops revealed disturbing patterns in celebrity photography that had contributed to numerous mental health crises beyond Kurt's case. Celebrity Spotlight magazine eventually faced a class action lawsuit from families of celebrities who had been subjected to similar surveillance. The lawsuit revealed that editors had specifically targeted celebrities showing signs of psychological distress. Celebrity Spotlight magazine was forced to pay $15 million in settlements and implement comprehensive reforms in their photography practices. Tank's confession also led to criminal investigations in several jurisdictions where similar intensive surveillance had taken place. What these photographers were doing crossed the line from journalism into stalking and harassment, explained Detective Robert Kim. The disturbing footage that Tank captured but never published remains a dark secret of the entertainment industry, a reminder of how close celebrity culture came to documenting and potentially contributing to the final breakdown of one of music's most important artists.